What's up, guys? It's TechnoViking23 coming to you today with some more commentary about Mass Effect Andromeda. And today I'm going to be talking about the 5 things that I don't want to see in the new Mass Effect game that's coming out next year. Now, if you guys watched my first video, I did the 5 things I was most looking forward to, most hoping for in the new Mass Effect game. So this time I am going to talk about a couple of things that I'm a little bit concerned about given the current trend of games these days, and just some things that I really hope don't make their way into Mass Effect Andromeda. And I also I'm going to touch a little bit on some of the past Mass Effect games and some of the flaws, things that I didn't exactly like about those, and talk about how I hope they don't make their way into this next iteration of the Mass Effect universe. As always, guys, hope you guys will comment down below. Like I said, I'm going to try to put together a subscriber video based on the things you guys want to see and don't want to see, and do a third video in this series. But let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I really don't want to see with Mass Effect Andromeda is a linear story and linear gameplay. I feel like as the Mass Effect trilogy went through, it started off really well with the RPG elements with the first Mass Effect. Mass Effect 2 added in a little bit more linear gameplay, a little bit less exploration and whatnot. And by the time we got to Mass Effect 3, it was basically just go here, do this. Really not a whole lot to do on the side. And I think that has a little bit to do with EA's influence on the series, but honestly just did not really enjoy those aspects so much in Mass Effect 3. Not so much in Mass Effect 2, because Mass Effect 2 is still a really good game. But by the time I got to Mass Effect 3, I really did miss the kind of the open world exploration that we had in the first game, and to a little bit of an extent in Mass Effect 2. So I really don't want to see any real linear progression, linear story. I want to kind of be able to go wherever and do whatever I want to do at whatever time, since this is going to be a game sort of about exploration. Since we're in this new galaxy, there shouldn't be this linear path that we have to follow. So I hope that Bioware does not decide to go that route with Mass Effect Andromeda. I hope they return more to the RPG roots that Mass Effect started off with. The second thing I don't want to see in Mass Effect Andromeda is lazy resource gathering, sort of similar to how it was in Mass Effect 2, Mass Effect 3, and even the first Mass Effect to an extent. And, that we had to go gather resources on different planets, and in the end of the day, they didn't really do much. On the first Mass Effect game, that's one of the things I did not like at all, was you spent all this time driving around in the Mako, marking these resource points and, minerals on each planet, and then at the end of the day, they really didn't have any effect on any of the other games. The first time I played through Mass Effect, I was like, oh, I gotta go find all these resources because these might have an effect on the story later on in Mass Effect 2 or Mass Effect 3, if we have to go back and find resources that we marked in the first game to help us against the Reapers. And of course, none of that turned out to be true. So that was a little bit of an annoyance with the Mass Effect series. I also don't want to see resource gathering like they had in Dragon Age Inquisition, where you're just going around trying to farm materials that at the end of the day really don't seem to have much of an effect on what you're doing. I know there was a crafting system in Dragon Age Inquisition, but it really just never seemed like you could find what you actually needed. You just wound up gathering a bunch of useless materials that filled up your inventory space. I don't want to have something like that. I hope they really put in a little bit more of an immersive and rewarding resource gathering system, so that when you're going around finding things, hopefully, if resource gathering is a part of the game, it's actually going to have a positive effect on your campaign as you go through the universe, and it's going to help you, further explore other areas. And it'll be interesting. I think a system somewhat like what they have in Fallout 4 would be kind of neat, where you can build up little settlements and areas and things like that, and use your resources to create advantages for yourself and your team. So hopefully they won't do lazy resource gathering, no more of this, oh, we're just going to show a map of a planet and shoot down probes and collect minerals that way. That was really lazy, I thought, in Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3. They kind of didn't even really do anything with Mass Effect 3, but really enjoyed looking for the minerals in the first Mass Effect game, driving the Mako around. But again, like I said, at the end of the day, it really didn't do anything for you except finished off. I think there's a quest you could do for it, but that was really about it. So I want to see it have a little bit more meaning and make it a little bit more immersive. A third thing I definitely do not want to see in Mass Effect Andromeda is PvP of any kind, and I kind of touched on this in the 5 things I wanted video, where I was talking about how I hope they do multiplayer again, and I hope it's done just as well as Mass Effect 3 with some add-ons and some improvements to it. But I definitely don't want to see any kind of PvP in Mass Effect Andromeda, because the recent string of PvP games, quite honestly, mostly AAA titles, of course, they just seem to bring out the worst in communities. And they divide communities, and then you get the whole thing where people are crying for nerfs in PvP, which winds up affecting PvE. We saw this a lot with Destiny, and I just I don't want to have a divided community. I really, that's one thing that's thankfully never tainted the Mass Effect series is, BioWare in general, their community seemed to be a little bit more mature with their games in general. But the nice thing about Mass Effect 3 was it always felt like a sort of a co-op community. Everybody was cooperative, everybody was trying to work together. Nobody really, gets on each other's nerves. I mean, I know you'll have your trolls here and there, but for the most part, the Mass Effect community is pretty mature and pretty good, and that's one of the fun things about playing the multiplayer Mass Effect is everyone's kind of working together to get through to the end, to accomplish the objectives. There's really not a whole lot of solo play and people going lone wolf. And I really don't want to see any kind of PvP come in that would kind of ruin this. I also really not sure how you would really do PvP that well with this game. I don't want to see Mass Effect turn into some kind of like Call of Duty offshoot or some crap like that. So really hope they don't do any kind of PvP at all. Keep the co-op multiplayer model and, build on what you did in Mass Effect 3, because the multiplayer Mass Effect 3 is it's an amazing game. A lot of us are still playing this game 3 years later and still enjoying the heck out of it in terms of the multiplayer with Mass Effect 3. So I hope we see a similar model in Andromeda with some improvements on some things, but definitely don't want to see any PvP whatsoever with Mass Effect Andromeda. The fourth thing I don't want to see with Mass Effect Andromeda, and this is something that was rumored a little bit last year, was that it was going to have a similar system to Dragon Age Inquisition. And honestly, after playing, I've got about 60 hours in Dragon Age Inquisition right now, and I'm going to be talking about that game a little bit more in the future after I get it finished. I really hope they don't do this, because the combat in Dragon Age Inquisition, quite honestly, in my opinion, is not very well suited to a game like Mass Effect, to a game series like Mass Effect. I don't think it would work very well in a shooter-type game that Mass Effect is, so I really hope they do stick with the sort of third-person over-the-shoulder, or if they're going to do anything besides that, maybe go to first-person view, but I definitely don't want to see anything that's like the combat style of Dragon Age Inquisition, because the AI, your teammates, are pretty stupid. They don't always do what you tell them to do if you use the tactical view, and the combat just feels kind of slow and boring in Dragon Age Inquisition. To me, that's my opinion, just from what I've been playing. With that game. It just definitely does not have the same action-oriented feel that the Mass Effect games sort of had. So I really hope they don't borrow too much from Dragon Age Inquisition. I know they've been talking about it. Some of their guys from that team are going to be working on Mass Effect Andromeda. Another point I'd make on that in terms of the whole don't want to see Dragon Age Inquisition type stuff is I really hope we don't see the same empty worlds. That's a problem I've run into in Dragon Age Inquisition is when you first start the game, you're exploring some of the open worlds. They're pretty interesting, they're pretty unique, there's a lot of people in them, a lot of enemies in them, and as you go through them and progress the quest in the stage, you see your effects on that open world. But as you get later in Dragon Age Inquisition, this seems to die out quite a bit. A lot of the worlds towards the end are very empty, there's not much to do in them, not much to find, it's just open, vast expanses of nothing, and I know that would be kind of neat on some planets in Andromeda, because obviously you're exploring a new galaxy, not everywhere is going to have life and things like that, but I really hope the worlds are very immersive and full of life and interesting characters and aliens and landscapes and all kinds of cool stuff. So I don't want to see too much of an influence from Dragon Age Inquisition on Mass Effect Andromeda. I know they've mentioned that in some of their interviews, so I'm hoping they don't get too far away from the system that's made Mass Effect so enjoyable. And finally, the fifth thing I definitely do not want to see with Mass Effect Andromeda is just a whole DLC season pass type fiasco, which is really something we didn't have much of with Mass Effect in general, the trilogy, when it first came out. I know there were some issues with Mass Effect 3 because obviously they had the day one DLC with Javik, with the Prothean side missions and things like that. I thought that was kind of crappy on their part, but that was mostly EA's influence. Still very annoying with Mass Effect 3 when they had that. However, Mass Effect 3 really made up for it because a lot of the DLCs that came out for it were just very well done. Citadel DLC with Mass Effect 3 is probably one of the best DLCs I've ever played. It just added a ton of replay value to the game. So many different things you could do with it. And that's one of the things with Mass Effect is most of the DLC has been pretty enjoyable with this game, and it provides a lot of replay value because obviously you have so many different ways you can play it, so many choices you can make, different companions you can use, and things like that. But that having been said, I really don't want to see BioWare come right out of the gate before the game's even out and say, oh, we've got a season pass and we're going to have DLC. and microtransactions and all this crap, because that's just something I'm getting really sick and tired of seeing in video games right now. Is, we get a game that's announced, there's a ton of hype about it, and then before the game even comes out, we even get to see what the game is and see reviews on the game, they're already throwing out season passes and DLC you have to buy to get the full experience and microtransactions and all that. So I really don't want to see that with Mass Effect Andromeda. Bioware, thankfully for the most part, has been pretty good about this through most of their games. That's one of the kind of baffling things about their relationship with EA, is that EA doesn't really seem to try to push too much of that off on Bioware, whereas if you're with a company like Activision, they kind of just throw that into all their games. But EA so far seems to be smart enough to kind of let Bioware do their thing, but they do include a few, DLCs and microtransactions here and there. If they do have a similar system to Mass Effect 3's microtransactions in terms of the credits you could use for the store, I'm not completely opposed to that. I think that's not terrible, because in BioWare's case, they did use that to support some weekend events for the multiplayer. They also used that to make some of the really amazing DLCs that came out for the game later on. But it has to be like it is now with Mass Effect 3, completely optional. If you want to go buy a bunch of packs, all you got to do is play a couple of games on gold or silver, and you've got a bunch of credits. You can go buy some packs. You never have to spend the money if you don't want to. And I've always encouraged people to just play the game to get credits to buy the packs in Mass Effect 3 for the store. And also, I hope you'll still be able to influence the RNG a little bit by buying the recruit level packs and whatnot going forward. Of course, we don't know if we're going to even see this kind of system of multiplayer in Mass Effect Andromeda. It's just wishful thinking and hoping on my part. But if they are going to wind up putting some type of microtransactions in, I hope they just keep what they did with Mass Effect 3, because I think the system worked pretty well. Not too many people really complained about it. I personally didn't have a problem with it, because like I said, I just play the game a lot. I just get credits that way. I've never actually spent a dime of real money on the multiplayer Mass Effect 3. I know a lot of people had decided to do so and go spend money on those packs, and that's their choice. And that's kind of why it's in there. But I don't think it's a terrible system in Mass Effect 3. But I don't want to see anything, coming out where it's like you've got to spend all this money to get, items in game, like the Call of Duty, supply drops and things like that. So hopefully they keep this game free of some of the bullshit gaming practices that have been coming out more and more every year, and they just stay true to, pretty much normal BioWare policy, which is to put out a fairly good product and then build off of that on DLC. Even though I'm having some mixed thoughts about Dragon Age Inquisition, I will say that the initial game is pretty good. There's lots of content, lots of things to do, and then the DLCs that have come with that further support the game and add in more meaningful content to play. And that's sort of how Mass Effect was also. You had a really great base game with lots of content, lots of hours of gameplay, and then the DLCs they added in, with the exception of I think it's the Firewalker DLC in Mass Effect 2. That's really the only one I didn't enjoy. That was the one where it gave you the hover tank and you flew around and had to do some missions with it. But other than that one, I think the majority of the DLCs that came out with the Mass Effect trilogy were pretty good and pretty immersive and added a very enjoyable experience to the overall game. So hopefully BioWare sticks with that and they don't go all crazy with like a lot of these other companies have done and put out very lackluster DLC and milk people out of their money. So anyways, guys, those are the 5 things that I do not want to see with Mass Effect Andromeda. Of course, obviously, as we get more news about the game, we'll see what winds up happening with this game. But I would love to hear your comments, love to see what you guys are most looking forward to with this game, hear your concerns that you might have for this game as well. I'd love to make a video just talking about subscriber thoughts. Like I said, I want to do a subscriber, top 5 things that you guys are looking for with Mass Effect Andromeda. So give me your ideas down below, talk about what you're looking forward to with the game, and yeah, just let me know your thoughts, guys. So hope you guys are having a great day. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you again next time.